Hi there. Welcome to Working Posture. This is Dr. Penelope Jones, and I created Working Posture 30 years ago to try and make a difference to people who work in the dental office. I'm actually a retired dentist myself, and at the beginning of my career, started developing a whole lot of problems, unfortunately, in my neck and my shoulders, and I was getting headaches, etc. And I was a very fit person, so I didn't expect that. So after I came back from London, I decided to go down to Melbourne, this was 35 years ago, to La Trobe University to do the Feldenkrais course, to learn the Feldenkrais method. And the Feldenkrais method is still seen as probably one of the foremost practitioners of neuroplasticity. That's the capacity of the nervous system to change the way it's organized. And I discovered a lot there, a lot of resources, etc. And when I came back, I was not having any more problems in the dental surgery. So I decided that I needed to share it. Now, this work is quite unique. There's nobody else that's doing this for dentists. So I hope that I can make a difference for you. So I've got a PowerPoint for you, which I will now link into. So I'm guessing you already know that sitting is a health hazard. But I thought, I need to go further than that. So I decided I'd look up Google Scholar, which is a list of all the scientific articles about all sorts of subjects. And I put in sitting as a health hazard. I found 100 pages. That's 110,000 articles proving scientifically that sitting is a health hazard. So I guess they agree with you. Poor sitting is responsible for cardiovascular disease, depression, type 2 diabetes, hemorrhoids, musculoskeletal damage, which you know all about, and pain and inflammation. So we all know that sitting causes stiffness, tenderness, aches, pains at work and after work. So what do we do about it? How come it happens? And why do we get this? What can we do about it? Well, the Valacis, an American couple, he's a dentist and she's a physical therapist, studied a very large number, like several hundred dentists, asking that question. What is it that makes dental people so subjective to these problems? They came across the conclusion that it's actually a multifactorial problem, which means there's no one thing to deal with it. A lot of things created. What they did discover is that it's a very physical job. And I think probably the most constructive thing they found was that people who sit at work all day assume static postures. This requires more than 50% of the body's muscles to hold the body motionless. They call these prolonged static postures. Now, prolonged static postures are those tight parts in your body that get chronically tight at work. And this is what causes pain. You can imagine if you kept clenching your fist on and off all day long. Can you imagine what that would do? Well, we know that in fact, that's what happens at work, and it's not good. So, what exactly is good posture? Well, I can tell you, you've probably seen all these diagrams. You might as well take them down because they're really not much help. This is somebody else's idea of what you should be doing, but really and truly, there's another way of looking at it, which I'm hoping to teach you. Posture is in fact not a static thing. We're not supposed to sit in one position all day. We were built for movement. Good posture is actually dynamic. It's actually a continual adjustment throughout the day to try and align your skeleton. Now, what does that mean? Your skeleton was built to act a little bit like a spring, but only if the muscles are available. What you're doing all day long is making little mini movements to adjust your skeleton, to align it up so that the forces of gravity and the forces of your work go through your skeleton. This is where the pressure is and the load is supposed to be taken. As you can see, the muscles are then free to move to do the work they need to do. But if you are slightly out of alignment, or a lot out of alignment, as many of us are, what happens is that the weight gets distributed down through the muscle. And this is what causes chronic tightness during the day. And because of the way we are with our bodies, we don't have the sensitivity to find out how to avoid this. But I'm hoping I can teach you how to do that. So the question is really, what pulls you out of alignment? Well, over the years, I have found there are 5 bad habits that we take on. The first one is simply holding your breath. So how many of you are aware that when you get stressed, when you concentrate, when you've got a job to do that has a lot of precision, you actually hold your breath? Sometimes it's just a little bit, and sometimes it's a lot. And you do this by contracting the muscles in between your ribs, the intercostal muscles. You also constrict the movement of your diaphragm. And what that means is that the ribs are not working as much as they should. You do not get as much air into them as they should. And it also means that those muscles start to get very tight. So the first thing that happens with that is that you get a foggy brain because you don't have enough oxygen. And then what happens is you go out of alignment. And this is the worst thing, because the muscles that are tight around your torso eventually spread to the rest of your body. This is not good because it means you don't expand your lungs to get enough air, and the tightness goes everywhere. The second bad habit is slouching forwards to see better. Now, for me, it's almost painful to see these dental students before they did my course, to see how they're looking right down close. Have a look at the fellow with the computer. Look at his back. Look at what happens there. So if you take it into a diagram, to bring your head forward to see close up, look what happens to your spine. It bends over. Your pelvis goes backwards, and later you'll see what the problem with that is. Instead of having this beautiful curve on the right, which is the green one, where the pelvis is forward and where the skeleton is aligned, that's certainly not so in the red one. So one of the things that happens with this leaning too far forward, I'd like to show something to you. There's a functional connection between the top of your neck and your eyes. Now take your 4 fingers and put them just underneath, at the top of your neck, just underneath the bulge of the skull, right where the muscles go into the bone. You can see it in both these diagrams. Make it a very, very, very tender touch. very soft. Now close your eyes and flick them left and right. I hope you can feel that those muscles start to flicker a little bit. If you can't feel that, make the touch of your forefingers even lighter and then flick your eyes left and right very fast. So what does this mean? This means that when you're staring hard into the mouth, staring hard at a computer, what do you think is happening to your neck? It's getting tighter. And what do you think it's doing to your vision when your neck gets tighter? It's there's an interplay between the two of them. So unless you want to have problems in your neck, you need to either get loupes, get really decent glasses, or start to work in a microscope where you don't have to bring your head forward. The third bad habit is raising or tightening your shoulders. Have you noticed sometimes when you're working, your shoulders are up around your ears? And the interesting thing is that doesn't help you to achieve anything. It's not helping with any of the work that you're doing. This comes from a primitive reflex called the startle reflex. And it means that when you drop a baby, which of course you wouldn't do deliberately, but if a baby feels like it's falling, or if there's a loud noise that goes off around you, you pull your shoulders up, you pull your belly in, your knees go in, and you sort of go into a protective position. What you're not aware of is that this primitive reflex sometimes takes up a little bit at a time during the day when you get stressed. And gradually, you pull further and further into this pose until again, you know, your shoulders are up around your ears. And as I said, all this does is make your shoulders tight. Now, the fourth bad habit is something I really need to stress, and that is continuing to work when your body is stressed and tight. Pain is our fire alarm. It's the fire alarm of the body that says, when you feel tightness and pain, it's time to stop or to slow down and rest. But what do? We turn off the alarm and keep going. And this is insane because eventually this turns off all your proprioception. You sort of become semi-numb. And the problem with this is that you need that proprioception, that sensing of your muscles to know when your skeleton is out of alignment. So there's a lot of retraining that we need to do to get you out of the really bad habits that you get yourself into. The fifth bad habit is how we sit in chairs. This is how our body was designed to sit. Look at the organization, look at the alignment of the back and the pelvis. The hands are free to move, and they in fact can move their pelvis and their body in all sorts of alignments. And look at these guys in the bottom sitting on the road. They can sit like that for hours. I've seen it in India. Can you see a chair anywhere there? No. Our bodies were not designed to sit in chairs, unfortunately. As I said, our body was meant to sort of work like a spring. And that means that the pelvis has to allow that. And we'll do a little lesson in a moment to help you understand how you're doing what you're doing to get in the way of that beautiful spring movement. This is how we sit. This is how we make those prolonged static postures. You can imagine sitting in all of these positions for long enough, we end up creating muscular tension that shouldn't be there. Look at these kids. I mean, that's dreadful, absolutely dreadful. So, how aware are you of how your body is organized and how your nervous system organizes your movements? I want you to put your hands together, interlace them. Now have a look down and notice either your left thumb is on top or your right thumb is on top. Now I want you to take your hands apart, put them together with the other thumb on top. Now your fingers will be interlaced in a different way now to allow you to have that thumb in a different position. You'll probably notice it feels a bit weird. That's because every single time in your life that you've put your hands together, you've done it the same way. Because you would have noticed it if you'd done it that second way, wouldn't you? This is true of everything that we do. Our nervous system, as we've grown up, has organized itself according to your development, your environment, etc. So let's have a look at the concept. We'll come back to that in a moment. Let's come to neuroplasticity. How does it change these habitual patterns? Because that's what you have all over your body. Well, imagine you've put your hands together in the way that you did at the beginning. This sends a little bit of circuitry up through your spinal column, up to your brain. Then it starts to spread to other parts of the brain more and more until it gets thicker and thicker. And this is a habitual pathway. This is why every time you put them together, you do it the same way. And it's not just your hands that you do that with. You do that with so many other things that you do, all the things that you've learned how to do. So what happens when you do something new or different, either a physical difference, intellectual or emotionals? If you do that different thing with awareness, attention, and curiosity, this is what happens, and this is what we call neuroplasticity. Say you bring your hands together in the other way, the unusual, unhabitual way. It starts to make a pathway. It goes up to the brain. It starts connecting with other parts of the brain. The pathway gets thicker. And finally, you get to the point where both pathways are just as thick as each other. And what happens is that means that each time you put, it doesn't matter which way you put your hands together, it feels habitual, it feels okay. So if the original way that you were putting your hands together was a problem, say for instance it caused pain, the nervous system will notice this. And what will happen is the old pathway will just drop away. So this is what we do in the Feldenkrais method. Buckminster Fuller, very, very famous philosopher and inventor, once said, "You can't change the system by fighting against the existing organization. To change the system, you have to find a new way of doing it that makes the old way obsolete." And it's exactly the same with the body. You can't fight an old habit by trying to fight against it. You don't change it by fighting it. What you have to do is create a new way with neuroplasticity that makes the old painful way obsolete. This is what we do with the Feldenkrais method. We get you to lie down on the floor, and we either have you in classes or we sometimes do hands-on work to take you through different patterns of movement by slowing down the way you move, by stopping you from having to fight gravity, and making suggestions about ways of moving. What you do is you start to become aware of where those old holding patterns are that you were unaware of beforehand, the ones that cause you pain. Then we make new suggestions, so you start creating new pathways. And often, if you bring your awareness to these pathways again and again and again, and that's what it takes, you have to bring your attention to it again and again. This can form a new pathway that can allow you to do things without pain. This is essentially what we do with the Feldenkrais method, which is the basis of working posture. Working posture is the Feldenkrais method thinking, but it involves a whole lot of other stuff that I've learned as a dentist working in practice. So why don't we try out a little awareness through movement lesson? So put all your stuff under your seat. You can take your shoes off if you like. Come and sit on the front, sit in your seat. And I want you to put your hand in the small of your back. And as it nestles there, do a movement where you press on the hand. So you squash your hand and release it. Press on the hand, squash it, and release it. Now, can you notice what's happening in your pelvis? Can you notice as you do that, your pelvis sort of goes back a little bit? Just feel that, become aware of that movement. Now come and sit on the front of your seat. Sit towards the edge of your seat so you're not leaning against the back of your seat anymore. Now, without putting your hand there, I want you to flatten your back like this. And notice what happens with your pelvis. Notice that your pelvis goes backwards. That's the slouch position. Now go back into that slouched position. You'll notice that your front gets shorter. And what I want you to do is from that position, slouched back in your chair, I want you to look left and right and feel how far you can look to the left and right, what it feels like in your neck, what happens to your breathing. Then come back to neutral. Then we're going to do the opposite. I want you to put your hands on your hips and do that movement of slouching where you take your pelvis backwards and you slouch a little bit. Feel how your pelvis goes backwards. Now you're going to do the opposite of that. You're going to take your pelvis forwards. You arch your back slightly and you look up and your front gets longer. You'll notice that your pelvis goes forward. Come back, take it forward again, come back. Now just keep alternating. And then just rest. Can you feel your sitting bones where they sit on the chair? Just do that movement of getting shorter and taller. Shorter and taller. This is a movement you probably don't do very much when you're actually working because we sort of get in a fixed position. And then when you hold your breath, guess what happens to your pelvis? it goes back. Now we're going to do a little exercise where we're going to find the sweet spot. Now the sweet spot is the place where your skeleton, your spine, can actually work as a spring. It means that all the weight is going down through the skeleton. Now this is because of where you put your pelvis, and it's halfway between the rolled back and the rolled forward position. So what I want you to do is to roll your pelvis forward, roll your pelvis backwards, backwards and forwards. Now slow that movement down. Don't go so far forward or backwards, and make the backwards forwards movement smaller and smaller and smaller. Relax your breathing, and you will come to a place where suddenly it feels a little bit lighter. See if you can find that place. This is a place I want you to never ever forget about. This is a place that I want you to keep finding for the rest of your working life. It's very important because it's where the vertebrae are so beautifully balanced that the little pads in between the vertebrae are very well balanced. When you go back on your pelvis, what happens is you squash the discs, and this is when you get bulging discs and it bulges into the spine. So really we want to find that sweet spot where it's beautifully balanced and it has a feel to it. See if you can find it. Okay. Now the interesting thing is, what I want you to do now in that sweet spot, I want you to take your head left and right. Look left and look right and feel the difference in your neck. Now I want you to notice that the problems in your neck come from your pelvis. So next time you start to get a problem in your neck at work, just have a look and see where your pelvis is. Do you need to come a little bit further forward so you get back that springiness of the spine? And see what this young lady, how she's sitting. She's got the spring working very, very well for her. The sweet spot maintains the three curves because of the position of the pelvis. Now from the sweet spot, yes, we've already done that. So the interesting thing is that sweet spot is actually a range. What I want you to do now is to come from that sweet spot, and I want you to bring the whole of your body forward, not by collapsing downwards, but by lengthening your front. So you keep your chin at the same height. Put your fingers underneath your chin and come forward, taking the chin straight forward, then come back. Go forwards by rolling your pelvis forwards and then coming back. So now let's do a little experiment. Go back to slouching, go back to your pelvis rolled back, and try and look down into your patient's mouth or to where you're working or at your computer. Feel what that feels like. Now come back, put your finger, your thumb underneath your chin, roll your pelvis forward, take your chin straight forward so your front gets longer, and now from that forward position, now look down at a screen or where you're working. That should feel a lot different. And the beauty of this sweet spot moving forward is that those little discs, the intervertebral discs, they remain in a good position and you do not lose that springiness. You do not You do not lose the alignment that helps the skeleton take the weight. So this is where I want you to try and work as much as you can. Not back as the red, but anywhere from the sweet spot upright to the sweet spot forward, any of those positions. Now, one of the ways to actually allow you to do this in the surgery, right, is if you start to notice that you're slouching or that your neck's getting sore, imagine putting your hands on your belly, balloon your belly out, roll your pelvis forward as this middle picture shows, allow your front to get longer, and then just come back into the sweet spot. It's very easy. Try it now. Put your hand on your belly, roll your pelvis forward and balloon your belly out. Take a big breath and then just come back into a comfortable sweet spot, wherever that happens to be for where you're working. Okay, another reason that you have to align your skeleton well is so that you can use your core properly. So these are the muscles that I think of as the core, and it's a group of muscles that all have to work together. But when you roll your pelvis back, you lose all of those muscles and you're left with only these. Now, the interesting thing is that because the external oblique, internal oblique, transverse abdominis, the Pilates muscle, etc., those muscles, when they contract, they decompress the spine, which means they take the vertebrae apart, which means that the disc gets a relief. But these ones on the right, where they contract, they compress the spine. Now, they should be working all together. But if you lean back on your pelvis and you lose this part of your core, guess what you're going to have? A lot of backache, unfortunately. So we have to bring back all of these muscles. And one of the things that I do in my working posture workshop is I show you exactly how to do that, how to recover what you've already lost. And it's not that difficult. Okay, the sweet spot is arranged. So the secret of good working posture is align your skeleton well by using your pelvis, allowing your core to work properly. And this gives strength and stability, but it also takes the pressure off your discs. And that means that you're going to have more comfort when you work. Now, another structure that's affected very badly by sitting badly is the sacroiliac joint. And you'll see it's this joint that joins the spine onto the pelvis. So it basically joins the two halves, the top and the bottom half. And it's actually a stress relieving joint. If we take it apart, we see that in fact it has a joint capsule and it moves. And it moves in such a way that when you bring your foot forward and you put your foot on the ground to take weight, the two sides come together. But when the leg goes to the back, push yourself forward, that joint comes apart. So it's supposed to go forwards, together and apart, together and apart. But what happens when you sit? You put pressure on the coccyx or the tailbone here, which jams the joint tightly, but it jams tight in a very bad position. So all the little muscles and ligaments that go across here, the one that goes from behind here to the top of the femur, the piriformis, this is the one that gives you a pain right in the middle of your butt on the side. It's very uncomfortable. that then becomes a problem. So it gets sort of, and you can see somebody when they walk down the street when they have a tight sacroiliac joint. I know the walk very well because I'm very familiar with it. The other problem with the sacroiliac joint is that this muscle here, which is the piriformis muscle that joins the sacrum onto the femur, when this joint gets tight and all the ligaments, the piriformis also gets very tight too. And you can see that the sciatic nerve, in fact, is very, very close here. In fact, sometimes the sciatic nerve goes underneath the piriformis, sometimes it goes underneath and in front of, sometimes it goes through the piriformis. So you can imagine if this muscle gets chronically tight, it's going to squeeze. It's going to squeeze that sciatic nerve, and that's why people get sciatica. You'll see the sciatic nerve comes all the way down to your feet. This is why people get plantar fasciitis as well. It's because all of the muscles down here become tight. When that's tight here, the piriformis, all the other muscles all the way down get tight as well. So it's not a good thing to have your piriformis tight, and it's not a good thing to have your sacroiliac joint tight as well. And one of the things that we do in our working posture workshop, I teach you how to unlock that joint so that it doesn't stay locked up. So I'm about to do a full-day workshop with the Australian Dental Association. And in this workshop, I teach you how to release your sacroiliac joint. I teach you how to use your core better. I do a daily program to help you how to unlock all those tight muscles. I teach you how to sit properly. I teach you how to use your pelvis properly to make your spine into a spring. I teach you how to turn using rotational and using rotational movement so that you don't actually end up hurting your spine. You end up using your pelvis more than anything else. I also teach you how to free up your shoulders and your arms and your wrists. And I also give you strategies to help you free up your breath and enable you to use spiral movement to end up turning. So I also have a 2-hour online workshop. If you go to www.workingposture.com.au, you'll see what's available to do online in the comfort of your own home. I have online classes, workshops. I've got little videos on Instagram and Facebook showing you how to loosen up during your work, and sometimes interesting articles about posture and about function. So that's all I have to offer you today. I hope that that has helped give you some insight into what you can do for yourself. And if you'd like to take this further, come to Working Posture. Have a look on Facebook, have a look on Instagram. And I look forward to meeting you all sometime. Thank you. So I hope that was informative. If you want to ask me any questions, you can either get in contact with me via my Working Posture website, or you can write to me, Dr. Penelope Jones at workingposture.com.au. And please look after yourself always. Thank you.